Done.
Sometimes better than I deserve.
Shaking hands, kissing babies, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Rhonda, have you fill that in and then pass that along? Jeff, they haven't seen it yet. Around the block.
We're the only one on conference call?
You are the only person in the meeting now.
Very responsive. Alrighty then. Well, go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome everybody. We'll go through introductions and I'll start on my right with Wing. Wing, tell them who your name is.
Wing Spooner, Public Safety Communications Bureau. And I don't know how to mute this. It's down as low as it can be, so.
We'll keep it for 5 minutes and after that, we'll get rid of it.
Jeff Fisher, representing Department of Military Affairs.
Tom Butler with the Highway Patrol.
Bonnie Lorang with MITS, Montana Independent Telecom Systems.
Mike Calder, Montana State Volunteers.
John Swartz, Montana DOT.
Ted Loss, Montana Emergency Medical Services Association.
Rhonda Fenner, Office of Indian Affairs.
Patrick Logan, Montana State Fire Chiefs.
Roger Nassif, representing NACOP.
You are the only person in the meeting now.
Joe Briggs, Montana Association of Counties.
Jim Burton, Governor's Office.
Leo Dutton representing Montana Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association and Chairman of the State Interoperability Governing Board. We'll continue with having people introduce in the audience so we know who's there. Clearly there's nobody on the phone, and if we could stick a blanket over the parrot cage we would, but for right now we've got to let it play. Starting with the camera, who are you?
Trent Bauer, Monroe County EMS.
Very good. I'm always leery when the cameras are out, so I'll be on my best behavior. Ed? I mean, whoever you are?
Ed Schindoff from Baldwin County. Could you hear me today?
Yes.
All right.
I am so glad that you came forward.
Dan Sullivan, Communications Bureau staff. Quinn Ness, Statewide Interoperability Coordinator.
You are the only person in the meeting now.
Chapel Team, Public Safety Communications Bureau.
Chantel Separis, Montana Association of Counties Legislative Analyst.
I can see your lips move. Try that one more time because I got...
Chantel Separis, Montana Association of Counties Legislative Analyst.
Very good. Thank you. Roger? Dale?
You can call me Roger. Dale Osborne with Montana Highway Patrol.
Keith Cook, Motorola Solutions. This is my son from college.
Oh, okay. I was going to say you can... Very good. Welcome, son.
We do have a sign-in sheet going around, so if you haven't signed it, please do so.
And so far, no one on the phone. Does everyone have a chance to review? Oh, and
Ron Baldwin, State Chief Information Officer.
Now.
has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting? I'll be right there.
I move to approve them, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and approved. Wayne's looking to see who seconded it, I think. All right, Mike, Dodo. All those, or any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Now, the status report from Mr. Sullivan.
You are the only person in the meeting now.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the SIGB. I'm Dan Sullivan, Bureau staff, and giving this presentation in Warren's absence. This has to do with the FirstNet initial state consultation process. We've received a packet from the FirstNet people, and what is being passed around are two documents. One, a summary of the FirstNet packet that we received, and two, the FirstNet packet. What I'll do real quickly here is summarize what's in the
You are
packet.
the only person in the meeting now.
So, what you have here is an initial consultation packet cover memo with 5 appendices. It makes more sense to work from 5 to 1 rather than from 1 to 5. So briefly, and you can follow along here, I've arrayed the appendices starting with number 5. Number 5, FirstNet has attached the relevant provisions of the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012, which essentially they've attached a list of what Congress requires FirstNet to do with the consultation process.
Dan, where's number 5? It's right
under the cover
You are the
memo
only person in the meeting now.
that FirstNet wrote. It simply, restates the law and what their duties and authorities are. Number 4, appendix number 4 is a readiness checklist and instructions to the state on simple things like file naming conventions and
Joining the meeting.
how they want materials organized as we respond to this request. Appendix number 3 is the initial consultation meeting agenda. This is a FirstNet product and how they want to organize our initial consultation meeting. It's fairly simple and straightforward. Now, within this umbrella of their suggested agenda, in appendix number 2, you will see requested discussion topics. These include the state's governance process, who are the points of contacts for the tribal nations and significant or larger cities, if you will, who are the eligible users, what coverage areas are we interested in, public safety stakeholders, who are they, what meetings and events there are in Montana scheduled. An interesting question. Maybe it has to do with Paul McCartney and Missoula. Major state events and state-specific information. Now, they have asked that we can comment on their questions and these topics, all of which would be covered under their agenda in Appendix 3. And finally, Appendix number 1 is a readiness checklist, and these are required materials that they're asking us to submit to them as we move down the funnel and schedule the actual initial consultation meeting. And I would also note that this is an iterative process. There will be more than one meeting. It's a developmental kind of a negotiation between us and FirstNet. Having said that, I will be answering FirstNet's questions from Appendix 1 and actually Appendix 2 as well. And the process that I would suggest is that we will post a draft reply to FirstNet on the SIGB website by May 23rd and send all of you an email notification, and then you can review the comments on Appendix as 2 and 1. And if you have any additions, corrections, thoughts, you can send them to me by email. And I would ask that you, if you could do that by May 30th, then we'll package it all and forward it on to FirstNet. The idea would be, what we are proposing is that we would schedule the initial consultation as part of the SIGB meeting schedule. So all of you would hopefully be able to attend and interact with the FirstNet staff and as they reveal their plan for Montana. So that's it.
Any questions for Mr. Sullivan? Yes. Jeff?
I missed these on the meeting notice, the SIGB site. Were these posted?
No, they were not. I was in Salt Lake for work all last week and did not post them.
Let me get the timing right. You're gonna post responses to Appendix 1 questions on May 23rd, and then we have a week to respond to those posted comments, and you're gonna amend them accordingly, or?
Yes. And if you have any comments as you read through this material, I'm obviously not asking you to read through it right now. I would say 95% of it are items we've already talked about a number of times and we've collected, and or including what our grant, our SLIGP grant request was. There's a lot of, frankly, there's a lot of copying and pasting here that will be done to complete their checklist.
Stop the music. Is leaving the meeting.
Goodbye.
Kevin Myrie is on the phone with us as well.
So all of you would have ample opportunity to look at the material and make comments that will be incorporated into the response.
Mr. Price, any follow-up?
No, thanks.
All right, very good. Any other questions for Dan? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next is Mr. Ness, status report, land mobile radio initiatives and activities.
Mr. Chairman, members of the city, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Wanted to provide the opportunity to all of you to discuss or provide any recommendations on the statewide communications interoperability plan. Distributed that out to all of you several weeks ago. In general, received just a few comments that I could share with the board. In general, a couple of the comments that we received were having more of a global approach to land mobile radio and some initiatives in the SCIP that are more global rather than specific just to the trunk LMR. Some of the existing initiatives that were drafted and put in there, as an example, training and those type of things, are more global LMR activities, but I just wanted to share those comments with all of you. I don't have any proposed changes as far as that is concerned. That would be up to all of you to discuss and develop any specific initiatives that you may have for land mobile radio in general. With that, Mr. Chairman, I can of course go through the document, or you know, to be respect everybody's time here, we can just kind of open it up to discussion and go through the document if anyone has any concerns or questions.
Anyone have any questions? Or do you want him to go line by line by line? By line. Jeff?
Mr. Chairman, so I think the outline is fairly consistent with our meeting in November. The sort of mission, those boxes.
Jeff, can you use the microphone so
Kevin
Kevin Myrie can hear you?
Sorry. wanted to ask, the SCIP is mostly LMR focused, is that correct or not? Because it looks like we conflate FirstNet with LMR interchangeably, and it confuses me. I think that the SCIP, somewhere in there says we're looking at current and near and maybe midterm future, and that future to me, at least in the foreseeable future, is LMR and not FirstNet. But you throw FirstNet into the SCIP, and I was wondering, is there an easy way to distinguish this, or do you conflate the two and interchangeably? How does one distinguish?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Feiss, I think a couple things. It's been kind of a challenge to Bureau staff to kind of put this together, because what you have is of course, the SIGB as the advisory council group to the governor in public safety communications. At the same time, in developing your strategic plan for public safety communications, we're trying to speak or respond to requirements from the federal government at the federal level. And in the case of land mobile radio communications and the workshop that you participated in last fall, of course, that's primarily through the Department of Homeland Security Office of Emergency Communications. And that's kind of what they call their strategic plan is the SCIP. And so we utilized their template and had some guidance through them. So we're trying to incorporate that while still giving all of you the opportunity that, this is your plan and your initiatives. Combine that with the requirements through the U.S. Department of Commerce, NTIA, for FirstNet and the SLIP grant. And then bringing in the governor's executive order, which speaks to both of those things. It has some specific directions as far as activities that the SIGB should engage in. So we tried to bring all of those together in this one document. So you see some discussion and initiatives specifically to land mobile radio, and maybe why they're not as distinct as having separate sections, say just land mobile radio and then broadband, is we were trying to follow OEC's recommended what they refer to as their interoperability continuum. And so these kind of initiative categories, I guess what we call them, governance, standard operating procedures, technology, training and exercises, and usage, can be applied to, in essence, any technology, land mobile radio or broadband. And so we were, in structuring the document, we were putting land mobile radio and broadband initiatives in those categories. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, just a comment, not a question. I'm not sure that's a productive exercise. I think, and this is just my personal view, I think FirstNet is largely an exercise in moving hot air around. And we should be concentrating on LMR and actual bona fide technology on the street with money that may or may not exist. I just think it's a waste of time to spend all this time on something that doesn't exist, which is FirstNet. And it won't exist in Montana in our lifetimes.
Bonnie?
Mr. Chairman, from my perspective, on page 6, it has the purpose of the SCIP, and it's a fairly significant document. It's to provide the vision and strategic direction for public safety and operable communications, and then to enable public safety communication stakeholders to develop a long-term viable plan for the operation and maintenance of a statewide trunked land mobile radio system. And that's a pretty darn important purpose. So for, well, mine's on page 6, sorry about that. It follows purpose. For my perspective, and I don't think we need to spend, an inordinate amount of time, but if we're going to vote and adopt this as planned for Montana, then I think it warrants at least by section, a review so that we know and have an opportunity to comment. Because this sets the direction for where we're going, and I just think we need to take a look and make sure that everyone's comfortable with that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
No problem.
since we're on the second purpose, I guess I would recommend to the board here that they look at maybe broadening that purpose to be all land mobile radio systems and not specific to trunk radio. I'm not sure it's even on.
Trust me, in life, your mic is always on.
So I think that we'd be well served to consider broadening that objective to be a little broader scope to encompass all methods of land mobile radio.
Other comments from the board? Tim?
Well, I'm not sure what that means. I mean, we don't have any oversight or authority over the system. Is that what you're saying? That we included anyway?
What I am proposing is that there are other systems than just a trunk at this point in time. What will be down the road, I don't know. I mean, Highway Patrol was not totally on a trunk system across the entire state. There's other systems out there. They're being used as the colored frequencies that the state maintains and coordinates. So I think all that encompassing package is important, and this document should be broader and encompass all that infrastructure and organizational structure. Not that trunk isn't important and shouldn't have specific objectives in here. I just think the overall purpose probably should be broader.
Commissioner? Mr. Briggs?
Mr. Chairman, I would agree that we need to put the other P25 systems into this. One of the questions that I have, and I would ask staff to provide that as reference material for us, is quite frankly, I don't have a good handle on how many agencies are actually utilizing trunked systems at this point in time. Since I'm on the working group, I did get a great list of sites in the state that include trunking equipment by county, which I don't think everybody has seen, but it's a very useful document. But it doesn't give us a picture of who all is using it. Cascade County, for example, we have 2 sites that have trunking equipment owned by Cascade County, but Cascade County itself does not make use of the trunking equipment. And that's a pattern that I think is repeated all across the state. I spent this last week traveling around the state for the Mako district meetings. Got 2 more of those to do tomorrow in Dillon and then back to Great Falls. And the whole question of the interoperability, the P25s, systems as opposed to trunking systems is incredibly poorly understood. And since one of our goals is to figure out how to take these elements and make a system and fund that system, if the commissioners around the state have no clue as to what we're even talking about, we're going to have a great deal of difficulty crafting a package that will work in the legislature. So I think we need some of that background so that we can answer, going down Patrick's Road, of who is even using trunking as opposed to who are using older legacy systems perhaps, or has everybody converted to P25 or some derivative of that? I don't know the answers to those questions, and yet I'm being charged with these kind of decisions. So we need some more reference material.
Colonel?
Mr. Chairman, Charlie? Is Charlie still in the room?
He's gone.
Dale, can we print a report off of the zone controller on the number of transactions and the identifier as far as what agency that came from?
Yeah, we could print a report that says who's using what talk groups, who they are, and what areas or what sites they're on.
And we can put that in a format that everybody at this table can understand, which is going to be significantly lower than the format that you would understand?
It would be some kind of big spreadsheet. It would be a rather large spreadsheet, but it could possibly be put into that form, yes.
Okay. I think, Mr. Chairman, and I'll get into this a little more with the next topic coming down, but this lack of understanding by all the various groups and pieces of this puzzle is going, I mean, we saw what happened in the last legislative session, and if it happens again, I think we can all forget about Interoperability Montana and all of this, because I don't think anybody was going to come back to the following legislative session and try and pick all the pieces up. So everybody's going to have to do their part in education here, but I get your question about who is actually using it and which agencies are and aren't. And I think we can come up with a spreadsheet that would show you there is a significant amount of traffic moving across the system every day from a large amount of agencies across the state, one of which is the Highway Patrol. We're certainly not the exclusive users of it. But I would be very interested to see that as well, to see who is actually using it and who isn't, and who could be and who isn't.
Other discussion?
And I believe we can provide that for the next meeting. Dale?
Yeah.
If somebody can add that to the agenda. Wayne?
Yep.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the conversation because I'm one of those Commissioner Briggs who doesn't really understand fully E25 versus trunking versus whatever other alternatives there are out there. So I would definitely like a tutorial.
Well, if I can understand it, and I use crayons a lot, so I'll take a shot here, but go ahead, Colonel.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, that for the next meeting, you and I should do a presentation, because, no offense, Dale, Roger, Charlie, all that. If we get all the radio techs in front of this group, everybody's eyes is gonna glaze over, and nobody will gather anything from that. But I think if we do a brief presentation based off the data we get from the zone controller and keep it in short, simple sentences, we could bring a lot of information to the table so everybody had an understanding of who's using what, where, and how this all works from a common sense perspective, because ultimately I just grab the radio mic. What happens after that, I don't have a whole lot of understanding of, and I don't think anybody at this table wants to have that understanding. If you do, we'll schedule a second presentation in a smaller group of those that understand that piece of the puzzle.
Fair enough, because I do have the technical background to understand the puzzle, but right now I've got enough data to evaluate.
And I think what this group is charged with is not operational issues, but oversight and making something work within the state. So our job is going to be looking at a radio system. This started in 2003, as you'll read in your packet. Actually started in September 11th of 2001 is what really started this, when the police couldn't talk to the fire. And that became a national issue. If you wanted money for radios, if you wanted to improve your system, the word that you had to use was trunking. And if it wasn't every fourth word in your paragraph, you didn't get the money. Consequent, we'd never heard of trunking. We're not trunking salesmen. I thought trunking was when you tied boxes together and this trunk to that trunk, but it's apparently comes from the telephone. You probably understand it better than I did. Now I understand it, being on the original part, was it allowed multiple users for more frequencies. So you could put 4 repeaters in the same site and the computer chooses who you talk to. You no longer have a send and receive frequency, such as a repeater pair, where if you had 6 frequencies or 6 agencies all using their own send and receive, you could combine all of those and have them on a system where if they keyed the mic that sent a signal to talk, they didn't know which frequency they were sending on, and they didn't know which frequency they were receiving on. And then so they used those as groups, talk groups. It works well. We handle a lot of traffic, not just here. If, as the Colonel said, if you watch the zone controller, you would be amazed at how much traffic that it will hold. Now, it's not the panacea. It got sold as the greatest thing since sliced bread, and that's not true. We have somewhat of a hybrid system here that we use trunking for wide area coverage. It is extremely better than what we had. It is way better, but there are conditions and times when it's not the answer. And you can alleviate traffic on it by going to simplex direct. That's a non-repeated frequency. Or you can use a repeater that you still have. Some areas have not went to it, such as your Cascade County has not, but it does work in your area. Great Falls PD has went to it, and they're working through the issues of multipath, things like that, that happens every time. It's no shock that when you get a new computer that I've yet to hear somebody say, man, this is just what I wanted my whole life and it works just like a dream. I've never heard that yet, but it's going to be there. I know it. There's issues you work out to make it work like you want it to. It works up on the High Line. I've been over in Jordan, Montana, for those of you who know where that is. I'm from there, I can do that. Anyway, looking in the armpit, God bless them. I could talk to my dispatch, or I could talk to anybody that's on the system. It's like the internet. Once you reach into the system, you can talk to anybody that's in the system, such as the internet. If you can get on your computer and get into the wireless internet, and you can go anywhere the internet goes. The trunking system is the same way. The access you have is a footprint of that trunking system. Who's on your trunking system or who has your talk groups is your control. There was issue about, well, I don't want to give control to other people, but you control that, you being your local agency. Kalispell is on it. I know that they've had some rough goes, and maybe they're still having a rough go, I don't know. We beat up Jack pretty good. I mean, we've helped Jack Spillman. But the issue is to make it work and make it better. The idea is when something goes bad, that we can all talk. There was questions of why didn't we go to fiber. And initially when we went and looked at where we needed to go and what we needed to do, fiber was out of our reach. We couldn't get fiber up to the mountaintops, all of those kind of things. And understand this is 2003, not current day, where fiber is buried in eastern Montana a lot more than it is here, because the elevation change is not quite so bad there. You know, if you're up and down 10 feet or, I mean, I know there's more, but anyway, those are some of the reasons. We also stayed with VHF instead of going with 800 megahertz. 800 megahertz was suggested. The reason we didn't go with 800 megahertz is because of the distance that we need to go and the topography. I don't know how it does it, but VHF bends and moves and around mountains and does some weird stuff. But in that weird stuff is it works. You know, it'll move around mountains, it'll reach into places. I don't know how it does it. 800 packs a punch, but it only a very short distance. And your cell phone is an example of 800 megahertz. It's very powerful, goes through cement, all of those kind of things, but you can't get very far from an antenna. We didn't think we had the infrastructure to do 800. It is a great powerful tool. It's wider. Okay, now this is where I'm going fuzzy here. You can put more out on 800 frequency, or you have the option, or bandwidth. The widget connects to the Frammer stand. Yeah, we're right next to the thingamajig. All right, enough of that. You've reached my quick knowledge, but Tom and I can talk to you more about who's all on it. There is probably more than you suspect. All right, break. All right, now we're back from our break. Everybody need a break? Were you done?
Mr. Chairman, members of the CIBI, I guess staff is requesting some direction. Would you like us to hold off on adopting the SIGB or the SCIP at this time until we have further discussions?
From my ears or my hearing aids, I would say yes. I think there's more discussion needed, and to give the feedback, what's process? I mean, we need to put a timeline on it, I understand, but we need to get feedback from this body to you as to what we want in there.
Correct, Mr. Chairman. I think the most difficult part is just getting a document, getting something on paper for everybody to look at and consider. And of course, I'd recommend putting this on the agenda for the next meeting, and that can just be a continuation of the discussion. You can send your comments or suggested edits in, and we can try and prepare, one document so everybody can look at the same suggested changes, any new initiatives. Of course, after the presentation that we just spoke about that's going to be scheduled, maybe we want to allow some time for some additional initiatives from the board.
And I understand the concerns. Please put them on paper, send them to Mr. Ness so he can put them on the email for however you do it for the rest of us to look at. If you're not sure how to word it or how to encompass it, give him a call. He's a cunning artificer in the English language and can help, much like Jeff. Jeff?
Mr. Chairman, just a comment for Mr. Ness. On several of those tables, there are some completion dates that are close, several 2014 completion dates for some of the items that are included on those goals. And so maybe next meeting we can talk about where we are, the status of those, because several of them are coming around the corner, and I would appreciate discussing where we are on having achieved some of those goals that have 2014 completion dates. I'm looking in particular on page 20, the life cycle funding goals. There's a July 14, October 14, January 14 on educate stakeholders on cycle funding. Maybe we've done this, I don't recall. So I'll send you a comment on that too, but I just thought that we should be prepared next meeting to talk about where we are on those, what the status is on those.
Mr. Chairman, members of SIGB, absolutely. Once again, this is your plan. We put in, out of the workshop, we put in some suggested dates, but that is open to your discussion. Specifically on the goal number 17, of course, the SIGB formed the working group, and the working group did meet, and we drafted some information so that potentially the working group may be able to come back at the next meeting and provide a recommendation on the governance operational entity that will fall into that. And that particular completion date is that January 2014. Educates stakeholders on life cycle funding. We did have a workshop on that back in January, and we're just continuing that process through the working group and having the working group come back and brief the SIGB.
Bonnie?
Well, just a question, maybe it's for Quinn. He and I exchanged some communications, but on the working groups, are those names posted somewhere where we know who's on those various working groups with maybe a contact or something? So if someone on the board wanted to share information or have information, we would know who is working on those groups.
Mr. Chairman, members of SIGB, I get that recommendation from all of you if you think that would be helpful. You'll see in the plan, as an example, typically how this governance structure works is, of course, the SIGB's only meeting once a month at this time. That's a pretty high frequency for a board of this type. So the working groups can meet in the interim and kind of focus on a specific task that the SIGB gives them. So we can start you'll see in the initiatives, a lot of the assignments for those tasks, those initiatives are with working groups, so we'll need to create more working groups. The working groups can include SIGB members, or they can include representatives from your associations. Really, we're looking for subject matter experts, so that the working group meetings and discussions are professional and well developed, so that you get good recommendations. But as the SIGB creates working groups, we can certainly post those if that's something that you would.
I think she's asking for this particular group you're talking about, who it is, so.
Okay.
Correct.
I think it was 2 meetings ago, and Commissioner Briggs, correct me if I'm wrong, or Mr. Dodo, Commissioner Briggs, Mike Dodo, Charlie Gilmore from Lewis and Clark County, Colonel Butler, and possibly his alternate, Dale Osborne, and Jack Spielman, and I believe that is it.
Roger was
Roger Smith, that's correct.
Yeah, the question came up, and maybe it's unique to associations, but for those of us who were appointed to be the voice of our constituents or our members, for example, MITS, I'm the conduit between this group and our member companies. And I understand and appreciate the working groups. I think that's the appropriate place to get into the weeds. I don't think anyone wants to get into all the weeds of all the places. There's too many places to go and get lost. But I find it difficult just for me, and maybe I'm the only one, so that's just my problem. But in having the information sufficient that flows from the working group to know what's being considered and what the topics are and what's on the table, and and then know what goes into their recommendations that then flows to the SIGB, because when it gets to the SIGB, it's usually, as I understand it, for a vote or for action. And I have a responsibility to the people that I represent to have their intake and their input. And so it's important for those that are here on behalf of other associations or groups, whether it be the counties or the sheriffs or the emergency or whoever that may be, to have the information to take back to their constituents and say, well, this is the recommendation and this is why it was made. Are you okay with that? Or do you have anything that you'd want to, or is there something that you missed? I mean, to get another perspective of those folks that know far more about it than I do. So they get back to me and say, oh yeah, it's fine. We're okay with that. Oh, here's this one item. We suggest additional discussion on that. There seems to just be a little break in the process when you go directly from a working group to the SIGB for a recommendation.
I'm gonna jump in here. We're headed down a road that's got a big sign that says Bridge Out. This is where Interoperability Montana failed. And I understand your issues. When we put this committee together, we asked that you be someone of decision-making capability for your organization and understand your sense of responsibility and appreciate that. What we cannot do is we cannot have a presentation, go back. This is where I am failed and bad, is that they would want to go back and collect requests, and they had no one that could make a decision. And we cannot do that. We will fail. So either please volunteer to be on the group that's making those decisions. If you want to be on the technical group, you're welcome to do that. If that helps you take your information back or you're part of that decision that brings to the board. But to get presented and then wait and wait, we're going to come into a legislative year that it won't work. I saw it fail. And with all due respect, I can appreciate wanting to take your info back, but we ask you to come with decision-making authority. And if they have not answered your question where you can go back and properly answer, that's an issue you can bring up here. But to make us all part of that working group is not efficient. That's why we have working groups. And the recommendations, if they're not explaining it, please do so, but we're not going to head down that road. It's cumbersome, and we have full faith that if you wanted to go on there, that you will bring forth a recommendation. If you have that feeling you want to, we welcome it, but we're not going to wait. Mr. Feist?
Mr. Chairman, those comments are well taken. Sort of a follow-up on that. When the working group comes up with whatever it comes up with, it's going to present its recommendations to SIGB. Is this how the process is going to work? And then SIGB will have an opportunity to comment on the working group recommendations?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I concur. Of course, that's kind of just to reiterate what Sheriff Dunn and Mr. Chairman was explaining. In essence, the SIGB as a whole tasks the working group with a specific activity or a recommendation. For example, the working group that was just recently created was tasked with coming back and providing a recommendation on the governance or operational structure for operating and maintaining the statewide trunk system. So the working group will come back and brief the SIGB and provide that recommendation, and then the SIGB would take action on adopting that recommendation.
Or amending it?
Or amending, I mean, that's all part of board business.
Yeah, we still have to vote on it up or down, and your questions are well-founded of, do you understand it, those kind of things, but I get it, I understand it, but we're not gonna take it under advisement. We gotta trust some people. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Bonnie and Jeff, I think, at least going forward from the technical working group side of life, we don't have any money to spend. So we're not going to be making any decisions anytime soon until July 1 of 2015, should we be successful in the legislature that we actually got some staff and budget to do something. So there were a lot of decisions made in the technical working group relative to the ongoing grants that were in process when IM dissolved itself that were made, but I think going forward, that technical working group, other than system maintenance system maintenance issues and how we're gonna cover those, there really isn't any big decisions coming that I see in the technical working group, because we don't have any money to go build anything. But what I would make a commitment to, being as I chair that, and I'm gonna get myself out of being the chairman of that we promoted a new operations major today for the highway patrol that I wanna ingrain in all that is, when we get to the point, hopefully, that we make it through this next session and have something to do something with, we're obviously going to have to enter into public-private partnerships to make this work. The days of bottomless pit grants from Washington DC are over, and I don't think they'll come back in anybody's career that's sitting at this table. So we're gonna have to get creative on how things work, and I see no reason why we cannot bring, and I might be off of my terminology here, the operations folks from the telcos to the table, or involve them when we were in a particular part of the state, wherever that particular telephone company or whoever is a holder of fiber optic networks, towers, microwave, that type of stuff, in whatever neighborhood that we're looking to expand into. There's no reason we can't involve all them in the process before any sort of decisions ever get brought to this table. At least that's how I envision currently as the chairman of the technical working group, and hopefully the new chairman works for me and he will have that same vision when we get to that point. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, did that ease?
Yes, that does. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
All right, I mean, we value your input. I just wanna make sure we stay on a path.
One more thing, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman.
I would echo the Interoperability Montana stuff. You know, the first Interoperability Montana meeting I walked into was at a table double the size of this, with double the participants sitting at the table. And this group is nearly at the level where nothing productive can happen at. And we need to be aware of that. If we expand this group to any bigger size, we're gonna be at the bridge out sign, without question.
And that's probably gonna be a discussion point about the integration of the, Kevin, are you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, when we get to talking about the integration or whatever we go with the 911, that's not on the agenda, but that will come up later. I mean, this group has a wide representation, and a lot of people here represent the 911, but we'll get into that conversation later. Anybody need a quick break? Or anybody have any questions left for Quinn that he can answer? Doesn't want to answer? Duck, dodge? All right. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So I understand we're gonna comment on this plan until the next meeting and come back to make changes. Is that what the end result was?
That's what I understood.
Okay.
That's what my understanding was, so, please send in your suggestions and your comments, and we'll compile those and then try and redistribute that out to everybody before the next meeting, to help facilitate that discussion.
Yes, very good.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
I do appreciate everyone that's got expertise in the room. You're here for a purpose, and you do bring good items or good discussion. Do we need a break, or do we want to let Tom talk about, launch into your talk, what I meant to say. Break, yes, no, go? Go, all right.
Okay. I apologize, Mr. Chairman, for last meeting I was unable to attend, in the meeting before that. I did not have all the meetings before the meeting to make sure that everybody had somewhat of my idea in this process. So bear with me for a minute. This is kind of a long-winded process. It may raise an eyebrow or two. Let me get to the end of the story before anybody gets excited here. You have all heard me speak that there are significant challenges to Interoperability Montana. The Highway Patrol has been bearing a lot of that responsibility and spending quite a little bit of money out of our budget to repair issues across the state, and I've made that abundantly clear that that cannot go on. I have a functioning radio system, some of which we've mothballed while we've swapped over to the trunking area. That being said, we've left all that infrastructure in place so we can turn it all back on should we need to if things don't go well, and that's just out of respect for the guys that are out in the car every day. I gotta have them a radio system that works, but I cannot fund a statewide radio system today out of the budget that I have. There was no allowance for that ever contemplated in the Highway Patrol. So looking forward to the next legislative session, we obviously have two separate issues in my mind. There's the operations and maintenance side of all this to keep the stuff that we currently have, the infrastructure that we currently have operating correctly, and then there's the build out of further system expansion. And frankly, until we get our operations and maintenance house in order, I find it very difficult that we could take on any more build-out challenges. That's my personal opinion, maybe others have that. And frankly, I think the legislative process, it'll be questionable whether or not we get the operations and maintenance side of the house in order. If we show up at this next legislative session with some grandiose build-out idea, I don't think it will be on receptive ears when we get there. So I think we really need to focus on setting ourselves up for success 2 sessions from now and solving the operations and maintenance issue this session. And here is, I have had 2 meetings with Bonnie and 1 meeting with Jeff, a meeting with the governor's office, several meetings with the attorney general's representative about a potential for funding, and some of this I'm not 100% certain of. There are others at the table that understand it better than I do, one of which is sitting next to me. I'll just relax, let me get through my spiel. 911 funding comes in 2 forms. There is the provider or telco money that goes to allow them to purchase the equipment and maintain the equipment that routes 911 calls. And then there's the local jurisdictional money that goes to folks who manage a comm center to allow that information to come in and be interpreted and dispatched back out to the law enforcement officers in the field. And statutorily, that's broken into 2 separate groups. And I want to make it abundantly clear, everybody needs to listen real carefully when I say this. I am not interested in doing anything with the local 911 funding. I do not want to go down the trail of 56 sheriffs, or how many ever chiefs of police we have around the state, or those independent dispatch managers who are a consortium of both. I don't want to get into that. I don't want to have anything to do with that. Just so we're all on board. This is yes, we all understand what I just said. I'm not going there. Now the provider side, 2 of which are at the table today, there is this stranded money, as I termed it, that AT&T and Verizon pay in off of wireless phones, where they pay the fee in to the 911 funding. And in order for them to access that money, they would have to show up to Quinn's office and give Quinn a complete breakdown of their business book in the state of Montana, all their customers, where their assets are, and how their operation works. And as of yet, correct me if I'm wrong, Quinn, they have not been interested in doing that, correct?
Apparently you're wrong.
Mr. Chairman, Colonel Butler, just a clarification. All the telecommunications companies pay the fee. If any of you look on your monthly telephone bill, whether that be a wireline phone or a wireless bill, you pay $1 a month. 75 cents or 75% of that goes out to local governments, and the 25% goes into the wireless provider fund that you were speaking to. Some of the larger companies, wireless companies in Montana, have not come in for a cost recovery in the history of the program. Some of your other, maybe Bonnie would have a better descriptor, I would call them rural wireless companies, have from throughout the history of the program.
Thanks, Quinn. So, and I misspoke there, other telcos or other wireless providers have sought and got cost recovery out of that program. To date, Verizon and AT&T have not, and it's been my understanding they're not interested in that. It may change at the next legislative session. But there is a pot of money sitting out there that I don't quite have a grasp on as of yet, as the amount that goes in on a regular basis or the amount that goes out. There were some legislative changes last session that altered that funding a little bit. And in one of my meetings with Bonnie, I said we're going to have to get a flow chart so I understand this in levels that in a level that I can understand to what's sitting out there. But it's my anecdotal belief that there is some excess money sitting there above and beyond what the wireless providers who are interested in that fund and seeking cost recovery will be able to spend for their equipment. That's yet to be determined. But through all the various meetings, when I've explained this scenario, I've been given the green light to go ahead and investigate that and sit down with everybody once we come up with, I mean, obviously the first thing is going to need to be understand a historical perspective from the last 5 years or so of what has gone into that fund, what has gone out of that, what remains, and then an analysis of the yearly contribution to that fund. And, you know, I'm sitting here with 2 cell phones. Everybody's children now has a cell phone, so one thing that will enter into this is track phones, and some of those burner phones don't pay into that fee, and those are becoming more popular. Or the pay-as-you-go, where you can stick money from your credit card on there. You know, that's obviously going to be part of this discussion and analyzing what type of level that is going to be as far as cell phone use. But I think we can quickly get to a point where we can determine if there's any available funding there. And we all need to remember in this, the chance of raising taxes or raising fees is not going to be looked upon kindly by the legislature. If we are able to utilize an existing source of revenue that's currently in place to our advantage to move the system forward, I think there's a small window of opportunity that we might be able to get that accomplished. If we get to the point where we're going to raise 911 fees, I don't think anybody's going to look favorably upon that in the legislative process. I'll speak a little bit for Bonnie here. I know she's going to want to say something. When I've met with her, she is not committed to anything other than she's assured me that all options were available on the table. I've asked to go to her board of directors meeting in July and have her, and I'll have a little bit more information by the time I get to that, to sit down and see what everybody's thoughts are on this deal. But the one thing that we need to all remember is this is going to have to be a public-private partnership to make this system work. The days of us building a complete separate system entirely across the state of Montana with no involvement from either leased circuits, fiber, wireline, microwave, we simply don't have the budget to do that. And frankly, it's not a good expenditure of tax dollars to be building a secondary system over the top of a system that's already in existence. So we're going to have to get creative to make this work. And frankly, the only way the telcos are going to enter into this discussion is if they know there's going to be public-private partnerships at the end of the day. Because this is a very tenuous idea that I have and could easily die in the first committee it gets to. So we're all going to have to come to the table, and as all good compromises are, probably not everybody, me included, is going to be happy when this is all over with. But it's the only way that I see to go forward in this next legislative session. So that's the plan that I have hatched. Whether it works or not, Mr. Chairman, I don't know, but that's the direction I'm headed down. But I want to make it abundantly clear that I'm not interested in getting into the local 911 funding. This is all on the provider side is the only thing that I'm interested in looking at.
And Bonnie or Jeff, you could probably answer this. I remember that the contention being that stranded 911 money, the providers felt like that was provider money, and there were 2 bills introduced in the last legislative session to try to spring that money loose, but some of the issue was that money should be going to the providers instead of the 911 people. Is my fuzzy? Probably am, especially on top.
Just on top, other than that, you're just fine. Yes and no. I mean, I personally, and our companies take objection to the provider funds and stranded funds. It's paid ultimately by the consumers. So that $1 a month that's paid is paid by everyone who uses a telephone, traditional telephone call, telephone phone, whether it be a mobile phone or whether it be something hanging on your wall. And those customers are paying $1 a month. So our concern is always if the telephone customers are paying $1 a month on their telephone bills for a telephone fee, that they not bear the full burden down the road of funding a wide, broad public safety system. You get down that far down the road, and then you get into a discussion of theory and practice and public policy funding and so forth. But in terms of the 911 monies, yes, and the bill that survived last session was signed into law was 575, House Bill 575, and what that did, it's, those monies that are sitting in the accounts aren't just because of Verizon and AT&T and their decisions of whether or not to seek funding. They're sitting there because those companies that may want to step up in their stead, maybe sell one, maybe some other companies that are out there. It takes some time to develop an E911 mobile wireless first response system. And so those long-range strategic plans, for example, for our companies who operate in central and eastern Montana, they have those plans built out, and just like the PSAPs that have costs associated with having to have that equipment that's going to take that data that comes off of cell towers, that's transmitted to their piece of equipment in their dispatch office, and be able to read it on the screen and then turn around and dispatch out a first responder. That equipment is expensive, and they have to plan for funding on the provider side, when they're talking about putting the equipment on those towers, that then takes the data that comes from your cell phone up to your towers and then captures the information for your exact location and transmits that to that PSAP. That piece of equipment and the associated elements, they're expensive too, and they also take time. So there's a little bit of coordination between the county side, the PSAP, when they're ready, and the provider when they are ready. So just because there may be money sitting in a fund, it's a step to say it's just sitting there and it's not going to be used and it's never going to be used. And you talk to somebody, Mike McGinley, Beaverhead County, and I think he said we don't have very much. Well, hopefully at some time a company's going to step in and do that in Beaverhead County, and there's other carriers that do that and counties that do that as well. 575 actually shared that 25 cents that goes to the provider side, as Quinn said, that's paid off of those dollars every month that Mrs. Jones pays. We took that money and identified what 575 did is look at those funds that are sitting on the provider side, and those funds that were on the provider side. We determined, well, there are some counties and some jurisdictions that are more challenging, both for the dispatcher side and for the provider side, and those are your sparsely populated areas. So any county that had less than 1% of the state's population, their funds were not touched. Some of those may be considered stranded, because if you look at the list, some of them may have a ways to go, but that doesn't mean that they won't have some costs down the road, and when those costs come in, they're going to be very high, and they have only a few people to pay for it in your county. So those rural counties were exempt. The rest of the counties, I use the word counties, but it's actually provider funds that are allocated towards PSAP jurisdictions within those counties. The rest of those county funding once a year on a fiscal year basis. The end of the fiscal year, the end of the year is July 1. Right after that time, the 911 office looks at those funds, and when you back out those ones for the very small counties, you take the remaining of those funds and you take half of the account of the fund that's in any particular account. So if you look at Cascade County and there were some funds sitting there on the provider side, you take half of those. You do that for each one of those counties. You never touch the other half for that particular year. You only take 50%. That 50% then goes into a pot where it's aggregated, and then from those aggregated funds, the first thing that gets done is there's some providers out there, and there were some providers that had expenses that had been approved for payment, but there wasn't enough money in the funds in their applicable counties to pay them. Again, the provider funds. 575 identified the problem that there were providers that had costs that had been approved for payment from the 911 office, but they couldn't get the money out the door. And the reason they couldn't get the money out the door because there weren't enough funds in those particular local jurisdictions. So what happened when those funds were aggregated, those providers that had unpaid bills were paid right off the top, and they were paid. I think the amount, couldn't correct me, but I think it was about $900,000 got out the door to pay their old bills, their old invoices. Once those bills were paid, that money that had come from the aggregation, the 50% from all those different counties, it goes right back just like it's brand new money coming in for Mrs. Jones on her $1 bill. And it comes into the state and it's split. 25 cents goes to the wireless and 75% goes back to the PSAPs. So the bill that was, our providers, yes, it got some of those bills paid, and it set up a process where every year, if there's unpaid invoices, they're going to get paid. But it put more money back to the PSAP side than it did the providers. So you guys are already seeing a huge benefit from 575. Are there still some funds out there? Yeah, they are, and like I told Tom yesterday, I think everything's on the table. But at the end of the day, we have to be very conscious of what Mrs. Jones pays, and whether Mrs. Jones pays the same amount as Mrs. Johnson down the road to depending on the type of device they use to communicate, because they both need 911. So there's lots of points for discussion, and we're happy to be at the table, and we'll see where it goes.
Anybody else? Clint, you're awful quiet.
I'm just taking it all in.
Yeah, I can tell. I
I'm
just
a
wanted
new
to
player.
make you feel welcome. Welcome. Colonel?
And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, you know, at the end of all this, the financial analysis is done, and the phone company or the telcos may look at it and go, we've got $16 million in funds we're gonna have to expend over the next 6 years to bring us compliant with the rural part of the telco. You know, I don't know, that's something that we don't know yet. So I could very well be headed down a trail that there's a negative fund balance in the money that's currently sitting there today 3 years from now. I mean, that's gonna be all part of this exercise. So I mean, there's a significant amount of money that's sitting there today. Until I get an analysis in front of me and can present to the group, and, you know, we're gonna have to sit down with the telcos and all be honest with each other to see if this can work. And at the end of that, it may not. And if that's the case, I'm out of ideas to what to do with the next legislative session. So just so we keep that all in mind, this is my idea. That does not mean that there aren't others at the table that can't bring something to the table that may very well be better than this, because I'm not convinced that this is going to work yet.
It may not work statewide, but I know Lewis and Clark is all in, chips are all in. We have contributed not only our county, but I think we've stepped up and helped the state. I think we have Charlie, he runs the wheels off, but no one else was really interested in taking him, I believe, in this system, so we brought him in, we pay him out of Lewis and Clark County. I know the Flathead County stepped up, Kalispell, Hill County did, and there for a little while Richland County had someone, and I don't know if they still do. Gallatin County, I don't know if they're getting their feet underneath them, but there are some major players here. There are some people that are on the system that have their chips all in. So whether the Highway Patrol is on it, and we hope to make this a partnership, I think it goes to the outreach of what Joe was talking about earlier, of saying the signal is here whether you choose to use it or not. I agree with you about not building out and making it bigger. Our system is now 11 years old. So we're beginning the process to replace some of the Quantars with what are they, the GR 8000, GRT 8000?
GTR 8000.
GTR, I'm gonna write that down. I've been GTR 8000.
In a six-pack formation.
Good.
That's what we call it.
Yep. And they have a flat pack and a BR 549 right next to them. Anyway, that's how much technical. Jeff?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the discussion, and I think there's more to be found in there. I had a couple questions for Colonel Butler, and that we can consider, as well as for ourselves, being the telecom industry. What is it, for instance, that the money, should there be money found, would be used for? What alternative revenue sources are there? For example, you know, what sort of money could counties or agencies pay as a charge to use whatever it is that you need to raise money for, which I need to find out in the first place. How much money is it that you need? You know, what are the costs?
That's all I remember, 2 questions.
I'd like, I'm trying to build a picture of what it is that we're going through this exercise for. And similarly with us, I don't really understand what the expenses are on our side either. Since I don't represent any wireless providers, I know from the FCC that dialing 911 is just like dialing any other number, so there's no expense there from the wireless provider side. The phone is built to make calls. So as I understand how it works, we build towers, and the incremental use of the tower for using 911 is infinitesimal. So all the expenses, as I understand it, are on your side. The PSAPs and building networks and buying radios and hiring operators and stuff like that. That's where the money is. And so generally speaking, what is it that you need? How much are you looking for? What's it for?
So Mr. Chairman, Jeff, there is a significant amount of assets out strung across the state of Montana from one end to the other. And there is no central core or agency that is charged with maintaining any of that. Lewis and Clark County and Flathead County do a very good job of taking care of all of their stuff. The vast majority of the other counties, Richland does a little bit, are all sort of waiting for somebody to do something. We have, the Highway Patrol holds responsibility for a significant portion of the microwave backbone across the state for this system, and that was a decision that was made before I ever arrived in any sort of leadership position that would have been involved in those decisions. So we're on the hook for a significant portion of the microwave maintenance. But simple little things, every site has a generator. Nobody's going up there to check the oil and change the oil once a year. Nobody's going up there to check the status of the tower to see if when the ice fell off in the spring, it about knocked the microwave dish off the tower or one of the antennas. All of those operational issues that telcos face every day across the state, we don't have anybody charged with doing any of that other than on a handshake, a wink, and a nod. And the problem really comes, which I've spoken extensively before, is when the ice does tear something off the tower, nobody has a budget to go put the radar or the microwave antenna back on the tower. So all of those system ownership issues, nobody contemplated in this grant build-out process that went on. So that's one of the major issues. Secondarily to this, and Leo can maybe speak better, is all the coordination that needs to go on as far as the talk groups across the state and what frequencies are used for various areas of the state and who's on that and who should be on that and who may be able to add to it and who has frequencies. There's really nobody that's in charge from kind of the operational side of making this whole system work. And I would think the third thing would be coordinating all the system owners, which unfortunately in this process you can have a landowner, a tower owner, a trunking equipment owner, a microwave owner, and a building owner. So easily at a site there's 5 people who may own something that various law enforcement agencies who have no ownership in it are using every day to make their agency work. And when something goes wrong, there's a monumental finger-pointing spree that goes on amongst those 5 owners as to who's going to be responsible with it. So we need somebody to kind of coordinate all of that. And to this point, it's just been various people stepping up. But again, I can't continue to do that. It's taking away staff time from all of my radio techs and some of the administrative folks inside the Highway Patrol. Would be no different if one of your member companies was charged with maintaining one of their competitors' equipment across the state. That wouldn't go over very well with you or your companies, and that's kind of the same situation we're in.
I'd be glad to maintain one of my competitors.
We basically need we need a band director, for lack of a better term, across the state, and some guys that understand the operational level to go out and maintain this. And then separate from all that, and I really didn't speak about earlier, is the future build-out. You know, I think those are all House Bill 10 issues that need the sunlight of the legislature and the input of the telcos and everybody else as to whether or not it makes sense. Do we plant an antenna or a tower here? Or do we move over to the next hilltop and rent space from Acme Telco service in their existing building and tower that's already there? But, you know, that's a whole separate issue, the build-out. Right now, we just need somebody that can change the oil in the generator, which we don't have today.
Joe?
Well, and Chairman Jeff, you also have, in addition to the damage that could occur that was referenced by the Colonel, you've just got the day-to-day ops that give you an operational cost difference between what it costs us to maintain one of our repeater sites electricity-wise without the trunking equipment is less than $100 a year. It's closer to $1,000 a year in the trunk sites because of the air conditioning requirements to keep the trunking equipment cool enough to operate. And then you've got the warranty issues. Now, one of the things that's happened is that the last of the funds that were available from the federal grants has been used to purchase extended warranty on the gear. But that pot's now empty. So who has the warranty requirements when that extended warranty service period ends? All of these questions at this point are unanswered because, as has been indicated, when the system was rolled in and sold to everybody, it was going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, and Uncle Sugar was going to pay for it forever. And that hasn't happened. And these issues, and as the Colonel pointed out, 5 owners at a site is probably not abnormal. 5 owners at a site who all know they own part of the site and know what they own in the site, that's probably abnormal. Because not everybody knows what they have responsibility for, because when these grants came down, the counties were basically said, you need to sign this piece of paper and assume ownership. Don't worry about it though, because the grants had to come to the counties, not to the state, but you'll never have to pay for it. And so now, from the standpoint of commissioners, a lot of the commissioners currently in authority were unaware that these even existed. And it was interesting at the district meetings last week, having this list of equipment, just chatting with the various commissioners and finding out how many of them knew that they had trunking gear that they owned. It was enlightening. It wasn't a good response.
Did you find any that didn't know they had trunking and weren't using it?
Yes.
Good. Where are they? Because I need some.
That goes back to my question of what all agencies are using it, because, you know, my concern literally is that at some point, somebody's gonna shut this stuff off because they don't even know what it's doing. And we're gonna disrupt probably the highway patrol, and I don't know who else.
You'll disrupt some of the things that go on statewide. Our sheriffs are responsible for prisoners, moving them around, detention centers. You probably ring a bell with you, actually you are, but we do it. We transport prisoners all over the state, and having that system in place is vital. I know that their thought was just picking up the cell phone and making a 911 call. There's a lot of places in Montana that do not have 911 cell coverage, but the system works. There's a lot of good reasons to have it. We just need to come up. We'll give you the information, and Mr. Burton, you were here way before me, and you just look like you're itching to say something.
Well, I just would remind folks that this is a response to 9/11. The systems that came out of the federal government to respond to that were what they were. They were grants. They were not set up for ongoing operations and maintenance. The grants were directed to local government, which had to own their piece of the system. And at that time, the local governments realized that they were going to manage a system of systems, and that they were going to be owners and they were going to be in charge. And Interoperability Montana was created, and it failed. At that point, the state of Montana was asked, the governor's office, to issue an executive order to try to salvage a multi-million-dollar system that had been built and was operational through many parts of Montana. Governor Schweitzer agreed to do that, and Governor Bullock agreed to continue it and expand the group to represent others that felt they wanted to be at the table. That's what this group's charged for if you read the executive order. How do we take a system of system that's owned by local governments and state assets throughout the state, build it out, and fund it on a regular basis for ongoing O&M? Never said it was easy, but that is what this group's charged to do. And I think it was pretty clear in the executive order that that was our goal, at least. So, I think Colonel Butler has an idea. There's probably other ideas that we're going to have to explore. But if we're going to keep this system going, I can tell you that with the trend in DC and other, challenges, it's not going to be easy, but I do believe that to solidify a system that's working for Sheriff Dutton and many other emergency services centers, take full opportunities when they exist on FirstNet and figure out a way to provide ongoing operation and maintenance, particularly to those local governments that don't have it built in their budget and do not have the opportunity to do so, and build it out, and coordinate, I think, where we can on public-private partnerships, then I think we will have done our job.
One final comment, and I mention this to the troops all the time. There is a big windshield in the front of our cars, and very little rearview mirror. because we need to be looking forward. We can't do anything that's gone on behind us. I can't fix what happened yesterday. I can't fix what happened, what Interoperability Montana did. I can't fix whatever agreement that was negotiated wherever that somebody didn't like. Can't do anything about that. And we could literally meet for weeks and go back in time about all the things that everybody perceives to have gone wrong with this system. And it will be a long discussion, believe me. At the end of that, nothing is going to come of that discussion. So we all need to keep the windshield principle in order as we move forward through this process. We gotta keep looking ahead, because looking behind us, we're not gonna get anything accomplished in this process.
Tim and then Jeff.
Well, and I think that's a good point. But even without looking in the rearview mirror, what we still have is what, a $65 million asset?
Yes.
Which is not insignificant, and which does work for a lot of public safety agencies. There are those who have been left out because the system didn't get built out, or they've chosen not to upgrade their radios and tap into the system. But I also believe that your agency's done a lot of work, and that in terms of the inventory of assets out there, it's my understanding that you guys have inventory, who owns what, where, and all of that. And that was the first step. I mean, if you're gonna manage a system, you first need to know what you own. Then you need to know what condition it's in. You gotta tie that into a viable capital plan, and you gotta figure out a way to pay for it. I think the viable capital plan is probably not too far from our reach, and we need to figure out a way to pay for it. And everybody's got a vested interest in the public safety arena to figure out a viable way to do that.
Jeff?
Mr. Burton stole my thought. We need a plan. So, and that was part of my questions to you, the multiple questions. How much do you need? What do you need it for? And so that would be helpful to find out, to have, seek our input, I guess, for what a good plan is for what you need and how we might be able to raise, the money you might need. So let's come up.
And that would go back to what the Colonel said, is operations and maintenance and future build-out. We can answer that twice, or in two separate answers, because of what we have, the $65 million that's on the ground now, and then what does it take to complete it? And that's what I got from some legislators last time, was, you guys have been here 2 sessions now. When are you gonna be done? And that was a hard question to answer. I mean, it's like, how long is a piece of string? As long as you cut it. The issue is they need something that's definable and definitive. That's your question, is how much is it gonna cost? It's best guess, because costs go up every year. Who needs it? Who wants it? Are 2 different questions. If you look at the Gallatin County area, the answers may be a little different than Marr County or someplace like that. Marr County is pretty well covered. There are some holes and things like that. But again, partnering with the telcos, I think we're going to come up with a solid plan about how to fund it. I am not in favor of each county putting in money, because Lewis and Clark puts in about $375 a year. I can't do any more.
However, I would hold on to that space, because I think part of the trend in funding any project is a sort of the concept of matching. So I wouldn't
Okay.
I wouldn't rely entirely on the taxpayer, but I wouldn't necessarily also expect a free ride. So to the extent you can charge agencies for use of whatever this is, and I like the idea of coming up with a plan. What is the plan you use? How much is it going to cost? And then I guess there's the legal issue. Using 911 funds, as Bonnie points out, should be 911 related. So these are 911 funds. If that's what we end up tapping, then there's got to be some sort of legal nexus to the 911 funded system. So I just think we have a lot of planning. I like the conversation. I hope to get somewhere with it.
Very good. Any other comments? Chief, anything?
No, great comments,
Okay.
great conversation.
Pat? Why Pat or Patrick?
Patrick.
Patrick? I was talking to that guy back there. Patrick, anything? Rhonda? Clint?
Nothing right.
I know what it's like to show up at a meeting like, you go back and go, don't ever send me to that meeting again. John?
I guess the only thing I would say is, you know, everybody owns a car and you still gotta maintain it. And it's like Colonel Butler said, you gotta change the oil, put gas in it, tires. The highway department puts sand out and you get a busted windshield, you gotta replace that windshield. And I think that's what Colonel's talking about. We do need to find funding for it and get it maintained.
Jeff, if you have any breath left, any?
No, appreciate it.
Okay, all right. You know we love you.
No.
Yeah. Mike?
I'm good.
Okay, Bonnie? Colonel? General? Ask, well, that was Thule. I used to call him governor when Bullock was around and made him, the only time I ever saw him beat up in the sweat. Don't do that. My comments are that I would, Kevin.
I really don't have any comments. I think there's a lot of good discussion here. I mean, the fact is, not only do we have to replace the oil and put gas in the car, we've got to replace the car. And when the legislature asks us, when is this going to end or when is it going to be done? In reality, never, because we always have to provide emergency services and emergency responses and do our job. And keeping up the infrastructure is really difficult, and there's 10 times more of it today than there was just 10 years ago.
Yes. Being somewhat of a smart aleck, I've been tempted to say, as soon as you turn in your driver's license, we're done talking on the radio, but seeing as how we were going for funding, I thought now it's best to shoot both feet at the same time. You're right, Kevin, will be an ongoing system. It has to be maintenance. Thanks, Tim. Those things that we have to look at, and our approach is going to either make or break it. And if we don't have a unified approach, last time we didn't have you folks here, the privates, and we didn't understand your issues, nor did we make a lot of attempt to understand them. At least me, I can't speak for everybody else. I think we have a wider representation here as a result of that. I think we've built partnerships, and I think as we look on how to do this, it is a winnable. It is a winnable solution. I would like to see, whatever we call it, the House Bill, was it 10, the one that comes out of the general fund that everybody pays. And why? Is because we are serving everybody. And that's why I didn't want to see it on the backs of the counties. And I understand matching funds, but I could use a lot of deputies. That money would help me out a lot, just as the Colonel and Dale could use fundings, or use funds to their system as well. So that's why I'm looking to that, and if I can sway you or convince you that everybody who travels through Montana, everybody who lives here, benefits from this system in one way or the other. And if you're not on it now, either your chief or sheriff has talked about it, and when I say chief, that's fire chief or police chief respectively, or sheriff, have questions, wonder if it's there. It is a system that works, not perfectly, won't ever say that. I have not yet seen a system that worked perfectly, but it is better than what we had. Any public comment? Going once, going twice. Did the son leave? Maybe he, oh yeah, he did, all right. Dale, anything? GTR 800, I got it.
I'm trying to keep my job, so I'm gonna keep my mouth shut.
All right. Well, that's encouraging. Colonel,
I will,
there you go, Dale, bye, see ya.
I spoke with Quinn in the hallway regarding an analysis of funding. I will come to the next meeting with that. Hopefully I'll have time to meet with Bonnie and Jeff prior to the next meeting with that analysis, so we can start to gnash our teeth and wring our hands over what we think about all that. And I will also have, some sort of analysis from the operations and maintenance side, which is why I'm looking at Dale, on what we have spent historically and what we think we spend going in the future, what that would look like to maintain what we have. One of the things that we haven't touched on today, other than the small amount of having 5 to 7 owners on top of one mountain, is all of the agreements that would have to be made. You know, obviously, Lewis and Clark County takes care of all their own stuff for the most point. I mean, we help out very small. There's lots of other counties who are not the least bit interested in owning any of this equipment, want absolutely nothing to do with anything, and they just want to push the radio mic and talk to somebody. And those are the counties out there that I would be interested in working on their equipment. I don't necessarily think Flathead County or Lewis and Clark County really wants the Highway Patrol or any other state agency doing anything with their radio. And that's gonna be another leap in this whole process, is figuring out who wants on and who doesn't. But I think there's a lot more that do want somebody to come do the work for them than don't. But that'll become a part of this whole process. There would be a tremendous amount of MOUs and interlocal agreements that would have to be done to make this all work as I envision it. But before we get to that piece of the puzzle, I know there's work to do out there. We need to find out if there's the ability to come up with the operations and maintenance budget to do that kind of work.
Okay. The next meeting that I see on my calendar is June 10th. Everybody have that, 1:30, same bat channel, same bat time. Okay, I'm dating myself, that's a while ago, but. Okay, I will be in budget hearings with my commissioners, who I will say publicly love me. God bless their hearts. I will give you a report on 11th if that's really true. So Ron is going to chair the meeting?
I hate to even ask this for what this might stir up, but I have tickets to the Mariners to play the Yankees in Seattle, and we're driving out on Tuesday, the 10th. And I would not be wearing this any longer if I don't ride in the car with my wife. Is there any?
What you're trying to say, you bought a third one and you need a savage baggage handler.
Could we move to the 17th for the meeting in June? Does that create a whole bunch of trouble?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, but I'm also gone that whole week.
The 17th or
The 17th to the 10th.
The 10th, the 9th through the 13th, I'm out of the office.
Seventeenth. 17th.
Takes me out. I have a workforce housing panel I have to run that day.
Gotta go meet with Sheriff Howard. County. But, what's that? But if a major portion of you can make it, let's go for it.
17th?
Yeah, 17th. Kevin, 17th?
I think the 17th will work. I'll be in Helena for another meeting that morning. Hopefully I'll be able to move.
You'll be all wound up.
Will Carrie then send out a update to the meeting schedule?
yes, Mr. Chairman, we'll change the meeting schedule and send out a new notice.
Thanks.
And Ron Baldwin will chair it. All right, seeing no public comment, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, second.
You can't make a motion in a second.
Who made the first
You made
motion?
the motion down there.
Oh.
I was making my motion.
John?
Yeah.
Is that John? I'm sorry, John.
Been moved in a second, we're adjourned. See you in a couple months.
Thank you.
Good discussion, everybody.